Welcome back, adventurers, to another week of Kids Life. I'm so glad you're on this adventure here with me, learning about Jesus and his life and ministry. So far, we've learned that Jesus sees us and that Jesus provides for us. And I can't wait to see what we're going to learn about this week as the adventure begins. You know, I feel like we've done a pretty good job preparing for our adventure so far. We have a team, right? You guys are my team. We've got supplies like food and water and a backpack. But what's next? What do we need? How about a shelter, right? A shelter is really important. If you try to sleep a night in the jungle without a shelter, you might get eaten by a panther or at least like a million mosquitoes, right? A shelter is really important. It can protect you from rain or keep you warm and dry, and it gives your team a place to meet up if you ever get separated. For us, our primary shelter is our house. And a house is really important for a lot of people. If you've ever had guests come over to your house, you've probably experienced your parents saying, oh, you need to clean your room, or make sure every pillow is perfectly fluffed, or make sure there are no weird smells anywhere. And we do this because it seems like our house is a reflection of how we're doing as people. So if our house is clean, it makes it seem like we have it all together. And if it's messy, well, then it seems like we might not. And in the same way, when we go to someone else's house, we try to show respect there too. We take off our shoes when we enter, especially if they're muddy. Or we don't jump on their couches like you might jump on your own. You want to respect not just their house, but you're respecting them as people when you treat their house nicely. And Jesus didn't have a house when he was doing his ministry. He would sleep somewhere else every night, but he always had a shelter, and that shelter was spending time with God, and he could do that anywhere that he was. But in that time, there was one special place that was considered God's home. Do you guys know what that is? It's the temple. And lucky for you, I made a very accurate representation of the temple. We've got, the outer courtyards here. You've got the holy place. And then up here you have the Holy of Holies where only the priest could go once a year. So very, very accurate representation of the temple made out of Legos. So every year when it was time to celebrate Passover, Jesus would head up to the temple. And he did this just the same way he did when he was a kid. But this year, Jesus saw something that he didn't like. When Jesus got to the temple, he found people selling cattle and sheep and doves right in the temple courts. Now, you might be thinking, what's the issue with that? Well, the temple was supposed to be a place of worship. It was where people would come in order to worship God and to present sacrifices to him. And the whole point of a sacrifice is that you were giving your best of what you had to God. You would be reminded that everything that you have is a gift from God, and this is a time to give back to him the best of what he has given you. But that's not what was happening here. These people weren't concerned with helping people provide good sacrifices to God. They were in it to make money. They were selling animals for way more than they actually cost, and they would exchange money with people and say, well, if you give me a nickel, I'll give you 4 pennies. That's not fair, right? And they were doing this right in the middle of God's temple. They were essentially walking all over his couches in their muddy, dirty shoes. And Jesus didn't like that, so he released all the animals and he flipped over the tables of the money changers. He told them to all get out. They had no place here at the temple. They were taking God's house of worship and using it to just make a quick buck and take an advantage of this holiday where all people were coming from all over the place. Jesus didn't like seeing God's home be disrespected like that. And a home is supposed to be a safe place, a place where we can be ourselves, not be worried about what others are thinking, and a place that we can fully worship God the best that we know how. And even though Jesus didn't have a home while he was traveling, he always had a home base. He always had a safe place where he could connect with God. Do you know what Jesus spent most of his time doing during his ministry? Sure, he taught a bunch of people, and sure, he did a bunch of really cool miracles, but what we see him doing over and over again in the Gospels is spending time alone with God in prayer. That was his home base, that was his shelter, and in the story today, we see Jesus protecting that being with God is a safe place. It's a place where we can worship him, give him the best of what we have, but also that we can be safe to be ourselves, and we don't have to get ourselves right or do some certain thing before we can be with God, but we can be with him just as we are, and he still loves us. And while today there's no longer a temple, there is something kind of like it, and that's here at this building. And while the church is actually us as people, as Christians who are loving and following Jesus together, this place is where we get to connect on a weekly basis. It's where we can come and be safe to share our fears and our questions and the things we're worried about, and we can be ourselves. We don't have to pretend to be someone else here. And that's what we want for your huddles to be, a place where you can ask good questions and not be scared that someone might make you feel less smart, or that you can share your joys and we can be excited with you together. And we want this to be a place where you can worship God fully with no distractions and nothing in the way. And that's what it means for us to have a home. This is our shelter, our safe place where we can come and learn more about God together. So you guys have fun in your huddles, and I will see you later.